Hey there, and welcome to this explainer. Okay, we are diving straight into what is, honestly, one of the most fascinating mysteries of human history. Have you ever actually stopped to wonder why, out of the literally thousands of belief systems that have existed across time, almost all the major faiths shaping our world today originated from just two relatively small geographical strips of land? Like, why did these specific blueprints survive while thousands of others just completely faded away? Think about the mighty gods of the ancient Egyptians, the Romans, the Greeks, the Mayans. These were massive civilizations that built entire empires around their pantheons. They lived for them and they died for them. Yet today, those gods sit quietly behind glass cases in museums. But then, you look at the living global religions, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, these didn't just survive. They conquered the globe. They didn't end up in museums, They ended up in our daily lives. And the sheer scale of this is just staggering. Right now, 80% of the global population follows a religion that traces its roots back to just two ancient geographic corridors, the Middle East and India. How in the world did these specific regions become the spiritual incubators for modern humanity? Were they just lucky, or was there this intense evolutionary pressure cooker that forced these specific human structures to adapt and survive? So to figure this out, we need a roadmap. We're going to start way back, 450,000 years ago, with the very first spark of abstract thought. Then we'll fast forward to 12,000 years ago for the first temple, hit the dawn of agriculture around 10,000 years ago, and finally arrive at 3,500 BCE for the invention of writing. We're tracing the evolutionary steps that literally wired the human brain for belief. Picture this. We're going 13 meters underground into a dark, narrow cave in Spain. Anthropologists found something wild here. They discovered 28 skeletons of our ancestors, Homo heidelbergensis, deliberately placed together. But the real game changer was what lay beside them, a beautifully crafted pink quartz hand axe. Now, pink quartz is a rare stone, but here's the kicker. It had absolutely zero signs of use. No scratches, no utility whatsoever. In a brutal world where every single ounce of energy was meant for survival, someone spent hours crafting a tool just to leave it with the dead. This brilliantly illustrates the exact moment our ancestors invented abstract thought. It was the very first time a living creature gave meaning to death.
Yeah, with abstract thought comes a really big evolutionary problem, uncertainty. There's a modern psychology experiment that hits the nail on the head here, perfectly capturing what happens when the human brain faces the unknown. Two groups of people were shown completely random visual static noise. The group that was primed to feel in control just saw static. But the group primed to feel helpless and uncertain, their brains totally panicked, literally projecting faces, patterns, and meaning into the random noise. When we feel helpless, our brain's survival algorithm forces us to connect the dots, even when there are none. Because, well, it's better to imagine a threat and be wrong than to ignore a real one and die.
So put yourself in the shoes of our ancestors, out in the terrifying, chaotic, ancient jungle. Their brains were doing the exact same thing. A rustling bush wasn't just wind, it was a spirit. A sudden storm wasn't just weather, someone was causing it. This psychological mechanism gave birth to animism, humanity's very first belief system. It was basically an evolutionary software designed to assign agency to natural forces, giving early humans a desperately needed sense of control over a random, deadly world. Think of religion in its earliest sociological form as the vehicle that allowed human tribes to survive. And that vehicle ran on two vital wheels. Wheel one, psychological stability, giving meaning, safety, and answers to the scary unknown. Wheel two, social stability, creating shared trust, moral rules, and coordination within the tribe. As long as these two wheels were balanced, the tribe survived. And for hundreds of thousands of years, animism kept the wheels turning smoothly. But then, everything kind of flipped. Back in 1994, archaeologist Klaus Schmidt started digging at Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, uncovering this massive complex of beautifully carved 20-ton stone pillars. It was a temple, sure, but it was built 12,000 years ago by hunter-gatherers who didn't even have the wheel yet. Schmidt dropped a total bombshell that flipped history upside down. He said, first the temple, then the city. His theory was that building this massive monument required thousands of people to gather. And to feed them all, hunter-gatherers were forced to invent agriculture. Religion didn't follow the farming revolution, it actually kicked it off. And this ties perfectly into our geographic mystery. As the Ice Age ended, the big game died off, and humans basically had to settle down. But why settle specifically in the Middle East and India? Because of an incredible geographic lottery. Out of the 7 vital founder crops that provide 80% of the world's calories today, 6 of them, like wild wheat and barley, grew naturally in just these 2 narrow strips of land. It wasn't magic, it was the intense pressure of survival and geography literally forcing massive human convergence in these 2 specific zones. But farming created a totally terrifying new problem. 150. That's a biological limit discovered by anthropologist Robin Dunbar. He found that human brains are hardwired to maintain stable social relationships with a maximum of about 150 people. After that, social trust naturally begins to shatter. So just ask yourself, what happens when farming suddenly forces a population explosion, taking tribes of 50 people and cramming 8,000 strangers together in the world's first early cities?
Well, complete and utter chaos. That's what happens. In a hunter-gatherer tribe, you shared everything. The Gini coefficient, which is how we measure inequality, was a tiny 0.17. But in early farming cities with 8,000 people, grain could be stored. Some people got rich, others starved. Inequality more than doubled to 0.46. For the very first time in human history, there was this massive incentive to hoard, to steal, and to cheat. The shared moral compass of the small tribe completely broke down among thousands of strangers.
And the archaeological data paints a pretty grim picture of this breakdown. Take the ancient settlement of Çatalhöyük in Turkey. Researchers excavated 93 skulls there, and shockingly, 25 of them had deep fractures caused by weapons. That is an insanely high rate of intense violence and social friction. Human trust had been stretched thousands of people past its biological limit. Those 2 wheels of civilization we talked about, they were wobbling violently, threatening to tear humanity apart.
To survive this crisis, humanity had to invent something totally revolutionary, the institution. And the very first institutions weren't governments or secular courts. They were temples. Temples evolved to scale trust. Strangers could gather at a shared ritual center, participating in the same stories and symbols. But it went way beyond belief. These temples actually became hubs for industrial food production, and yes, massive beer brewing to help lubricate that social bonding. Most importantly, they became neutral ground for conflict resolution and tracking community deaths. They fixed the social chaos.
This just perfectly illustrates how administrative these centers actually were. I mean, when thousands of people are donating grain to the temple, you can't just keep it all in your head, you need a system. This exact necessity gave birth to writing. 85 to 90% of early cuneiform writing wasn't used for deep philosophical texts or sweeping poetry. As it turns out, it was invented by the ancient world's HR and accounting departments to track who got how much beer and barley.
With all these resources flowing in, the people managing them, the professional priest class, gained an immense amount of power. If 2 farmers had a land dispute, the priest would consult the clay tablets and deliver a judgment. But crucially, it wasn't framed as just the priest's personal opinion. The ruling was presented as the word of the gods. This centralization of law and order created the divine right of kings. From Hammurabi in Babylon to the pharaohs of Egypt, the blueprint was set. Absolute authority flowed from the divine directly to the ruler, which stabilized these massive, growing societies.
Section 1. The Great Divergence. How the Middle East and India chose opposite paths.
So we've just seen how geography and biology kind of forced the creation of centralized religious institutions in the Middle East to keep humanity from literally destroying itself. But travel 2,500 kilometers east to the Indus Valley and a completely different story unfolds. Let's compare these 2 incredibly successful models. In the Middle East, as society scaled, beliefs centralized and simplified. Thousands of local gods were eventually distilled down to one god, one book, and one truth, monotheism. But the India model went the exact opposite route. The Indus Valley civilization didn't really have centralized temple authorities. Instead of simplifying, their belief system multiplied. It decentralized. The foundational idea was that there was one infinite universal truth, but it has infinite manifestations. So 33 deities became 3,000 and eventually millions, allowing every single village and family to have their own localized personal connection to the divine.
What's absolutely fascinating here is looking impartially at the supreme evolutionary success of both these blueprints. Common sense might tell you that one model should have eventually outcompeted the other, right? But both proved completely indestructible in their own unique ways. The highly organized, centralized, monotheistic model successfully spread and converted the Western world. Meanwhile, India's highly decentralized, adaptable model proved virtually unconquerable. Despite thousands of years of invasions by massive, powerful empires, that decentralized structure simply absorbed the shocks and survived totally intact. These two opposite strategies basically outlasted nearly every other system on Earth.
Which brings us to a final, kind of provocative thought to leave you with. We've explored how ancient brain chemistry, the end of the Ice Age, the biological limits of human trust, and the invention of agriculture forged these two massive corridors of belief. But the structures they created aren't just history. From the way our legal systems operate, to our banking, to how we form our communities and handle uncertainty today, these 4,000-year-old ancient sociological blueprints are still running silently in the background of our society. So I gotta ask you, where else do you see these ancient mechanisms secretly steering your modern life today? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the world around you.